So, hello, this is Juris Kaja in Riga again. I haven't done a video blog in a while. And the reason there's a bit of a different environment or background is that the two posters that you usually saw on the wall when I did it in a somewhat different position, they've fallen off, and they've fallen off because this kind of sticky chewing gum-like stuff that you use to put posters up on painted walls without damaging the walls, though that didn't work. It just kept falling off. And the result is that indeed you can clean the sticky gum off without any damage to the wall, but it doesn't last very long. The stuff you put up there keeps falling off. But when I've solved that, I'll talk to you again from a different environment. Anyway, it's been quite a month or so since we talked. What we've had in the interim is Latvia going fully into kind of a state of emergency lockdown. We now have a curfew 10 p.m. to 5 a.m. over the New Year holiday that is lasting until Monday morning at 5 a.m. and again on the 8th through the 10th of January for strange reasons, other than it's a kind of a weekend. But it does fall right after the date of the other holiday that comes, which is the Russian Orthodox Christmas. And then, of course, they have their Russian Orthodox New Year about a week later, but that is unaffected. The state of emergency has been extended. It was due to end on January 11th, and it will actually last until February the 7th. One of the more disturbing for the society in general aspects of this state of emergency is that there's a ban on the sale of various different goods and services that seems to many people to be somewhat kind of arbitrary and irrational. You can't buy pantyhose. At one point, you couldn't buy candles or matches, or you could buy these things that you put on grave sites, grave candles, but you couldn't buy ordinary candles. And the government seems to be trying to adjust some of this so that they don't look like complete fools with the way this has been implemented. And, of course, one of the major effects of saying, from then such and so time, you're not going to be able to buy this and other items, was that instead of reducing giant crowds at the supermarkets, it had the opposite effect. There were masses of people storming the markets. The first time around in this new regime is when they banned alcohol and tobacco sales over the weekend. And now when they banned the sales of a lot of these other so-called non-essential goods, including clothing, including stuff that people would have wanted as Christmas presents. So there are people all over the shopping centers, and if that has any impact on the COVID statistics, well, we'll see that in a couple of weeks. Certainly, it's clear that the rate of infection is rising. We have double-digit deaths almost every day, and we just hit a new high of, I believe it was 1,867 infections just before the new year. So the problem is serious. We're not quite as bad off as Lithuania, but our hospital and healthcare system is under incredible stress. It's not like Latvia doesn't have enough hospital beds. We have like 8,500 hospital beds across the country. But when a person is taken ill with COVID-19 and when has to be treated when one has to be treated in a hospital, the burden on the hospital staff is a lot greater. They have to wear personal protective equipment. They have to take all sorts of sanitization precautions, disinfection precautions. It's not like if you're in the hospital because you slipped on the ice and broke your leg. They just come in and say, "Hi, how are you?" and in their little nice white lab coats or whatever. That's not the way a person who has COVID infection is treated. That's not even the way a person who has an ordinary case of the flu or a worsening of the stomach ulcers or whatever else people end up in the hospital for. And of course, the aforementioned not so serious kind of illnesses are not going to be treated now. There's a suspension on certain inpatient treatments if it's not, acute and life-threatening. These have been suspended because the hospital staff in Latvia is vastly overburdened because of the COVID patient load. There are more than 1,000, about roughly 1,000 people being treated for that now in the hospital system. And also, as I said, the medical staff is overburdened with this. They cannot, at the same time, take off their spacesuits and go and look at somebody's twisted ankle, or go and look at somebody's twisted ankle 2 weeks after the ankle was twisted, and they should be in there for a follow-up. So this is sort of one of the main reasons that people are attempting to put on what some people would say are draconian measures. That is to prevent the medical care system here from entirely going to pieces. Other than that, there hasn't been much else going on. There were 2 different protest actions, one on the 12th of December and the other one a bit later, I believe on the 20th, to protest against all of these restrictions, gathering, at least at the first one, more than 1,000 people in the street in all violation of all social distancing and gathering and mask wearing rules, to protest against these, not only against these restrictions, but to openly deny that there was even such a thing as the COVID-19 virus, and to propagate various anti-vaccination theories. The vaccines are laced with nano chips or whatever to track us all, and Bill Gates is behind it, and Soros is paying for it. I mean, just about every lunazoid crackpot theory was expounded at this rally. Fortunately and wisely, the Latvian police kept a distance from all of this, because the worst thing they could have done was to try to disperse this mob. That would have created more martyrs. That would have gotten a lot more television coverage. Not that there was not that there wasn't enough television coverage of this, where these crackpot viewpoints could be heard. A week later, people attempted to gather at the Freedom Monument. There were far less people there. The first gathering was by the riverside here in Riga. There's like a highway goes along the river, and there's also sort of a park between the highway and the old town, and that's where the whole crowd gathered. This time, Freedom Monument, you can also gather much bigger crowds if you wanted to, but there were only about 50 or 60 people there, plus camera crews, and some gentleman from Lithuania waving a Lithuanian flag, which was sort of like putting up a big sign and saying, hey, I'm here from a country where anybody who enters Latvia should be able to present the so-called COVID pass and to self-isolate for 10 days. So he was approached by the police. There was a scuffle. He was dragged off for a while, later released. A couple of people were arrested. But that seems to have calmed down for the time being. We'll see what this new year, as I speak to you on January 1st, what this new year will bring in terms of continued protests about all of this emergency measures and restrictions, and also how the pace of vaccinations will take place. Now, we've had a couple of hundred, maybe even a couple of thousand vaccinations here in Latvia after almost 10,000 units of the Pfizer vaccine were delivered. And the first to be vaccinated are, of course, the frontline medical people. But there are people shaking their heads and worrying, well, how can a country like Israel, which population-wise is about twice and a half Latvia has just under 2 million, why they have managed to practically vaccinate half, if not the entire population in the space of a few days, and yet here, the pace of vaccination, the arrival of new vaccines, maybe the arrival of the Moderna vaccine in a few days, is going so slowly, and it looks like most people in the country won't be vaccinated before the end of the first quarter at best, and into the second quarter of this year at worst. So this may bring some pressure on the politicians and those responsible, and there have been signs and signals of a certain amount of discord and a certain amount of decision-making kind of dysfunction in the Latvian government, which is a coalition of, well, I will say it now, it's a coalition of 4-point-something parties. It started as a coalition of 5 parties, but the who owns the state, the Latvian initials of that party are KPV. The KPV party is basically disintegrated. They had 2 rival kind of party meetings or party executive meetings, which everybody fired everybody else, and they decided to change the name of the party to something else. And basically we can consider this KPV party to be basically a dead horse trying to sort of pull the carriage of government along, and leaving the decisions to the other 5 living horses. And things are difficult enough with them because there's probably a bit of tension between the Prime Minister's New Unity Party and the party of the Minister of Health, which is the For Development 4 party. And there's been some open criticism of the Minister of Health, Ilse Vinkela, by the Prime Minister, although that's sort of been smoothed over now. But we'll see where things go as the pressure builds on the government and on the society to finally get this whole thing over with. Well, okay, that's about all I have to say. Just wishing everyone, a happy new year. Here from Riga, Latvia, and I'll be back to you at some point soon.